whether it's good evening to some other colleagues. I'm not sure there's a good night for others, but you are all most welcome to this webinar. It's a webinar that has been organized by UNESCO ICBA together with other partners. And it's titled, How Can Educators Respond to the Learning Needs of Children, including fostering resilience and ensuring that their well-being during the COVID-19 pandemic is catered for. My name is Victoria Chisache Kanove. I work for ICBA as a Senior Programs Coordinator, and I'll be your moderator for this session. We welcome you to the webinar. I see the representation from a number of colleagues across the continent and beyond. You are very welcome. Please use the chat room to just type in and let us know which institution you're representing and which country you're coming from. We have a short time. We may not have formalized introductions, but we are so happy we'll be following up within the chat room. We have quite a broad range of speakers who are wonderful, and I'm expectant. I believe you're also expectant and going to be learning a lot. The background to this webinar is that close to 90% of our school children right now are not at school, they're at home. And with the advent of these closures, this set in a lot of learning spaces which are more online and other innovative practices to support homeschooling. But we also realize that more than 40% of these children do not have internet access at home. And many have been left behind with increasing disparities in access to education and learning, compromising their safety and well-being. This has also happened as a result of the socioeconomic inequalities that we have that are being excavated as a result of the economic consequences that we are faced with that have affected the most vulnerable and marginalized children. Of course, data from the United Nations University World Institute for Development, Economics and Research indicates that more than 500 million people, almost 8% of the global population, have been pushed in poverty as a result of this pandemic. And according to ADARE, our Association for Development of Education in Africa, and the Global Partnership for Education, the education sector is one of those heavily affected by this pandemic, with the closure of many learning institutions, which has negatively impacted on access to education as well as its quality. So as the world rallies to meet the challenge that has been posed by COVID-19, the pandemic, which we are all very well aware of, we also have extremist groups that continue to carry out very large-scale attacks and conduct a lot of cross-border activities and create a lot of risks in a number of countries, and the situation has become so prevalent that it needs to be addressed by the education sector. Now, the question today is, how can the education sector and the teachers, as the first line responders that support learners to cope with these challenges, be able to support them in terms of their social, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being? This pandemic also presents us with opportunities to empower learners meaningfully and also address some of the issues at hand. So our discussion today is more focused on moving forward also in terms of when schools reopen. It will be critical for us to continue providing dialogue with our learners to make sure that they feel supported, and also to understand some of these challenges they're experiencing, as well as some of these ESCO issues that they are faced with. This webinar, therefore, provides us an opportunity to reflect on how educators can empower and transform learners to respond to the emerging ethical demands in the era of COVID-19, as well as it's part of a learning module that is being developed by UNESCO ICBA, which is going to offer our educators support to learners during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. With that short background, colleagues, I once again welcome you to this webinar, and I indicate that it's going to take place in 1 hour and a half. We have 90 minutes of fruitful discussion, and the objectives therefore will be to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on the education needs of our children and young people in Africa, identify how the education sector and teachers, as the first-line responders, can support learners to cope with and positively respond to the ethical challenges arising during and after the pandemic, as well as its effects on children's social, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. And we also intend to come up with recommendations for educators to continue addressing the needs for peace, resilience building, and prevention of violent extremism in the current context. I'm going to request you to listen in carefully to the speakers that will be coming on board very soon. And we are going to utilize the chat room to ask any questions that may arise. There is someone who is following up on your questions in the chat room. That's going to be my colleague, Jerusalem, and she'll be taking note of your contributions and comments. We are also requesting you to mute the microphones in case you're not speaking, and also to switch off the video for the sake of us sustaining the little bandwidth that we have on this webinar. I have a participation of 68 people plus, so you're very welcome. Without further ado, I'm going to invite the first speaker, who is going to give opening remarks, and that is none other than Dr. Yumiko Yokozeki, who is a senior education specialist. She's the director of UNESCO ICBA, the International Institute for Capacity Building for Africa. She started her career as a science mathematics teacher in Kenya and Zimbabwe. She joined UNICEF as an education officer, moved to JICA, and after 17 years with JICA, she moved to UNICEF as the Chief of Education in 2 African regional offices in Eastern and Southern Africa, as well as Western Central Africa. And then since 2015, she has been working with UNESCO ICBA. She's based in Addis Ababa here in Ethiopia. And she has a lot of specializations in working across different continents, but also her master's in degrees from the Harvard Graduate School of Education and a PhD from the University of London. So Dr. Yumiko is going to talk to us about the focus of this webinar and why it has been organized, and why focus on children's resilience and well-being at such a time as this. Over to you, Dr. Yumiko Yokozeki.
Thank you very much, Dr. Victoria Chisaki. Can you hear me now?
Very well.
Good, good. So welcome to our colleagues and friends to this webinar on how to respond and then educate the children and learners in Africa in this most difficult time. In many countries in Africa, schools have been closed for 2 months by now. And then this is really a time for a lot of opportunities as well as innovation. But many children and the teachers are desperate because of lack of connectivity, lack of resources. So we have been working with the teachers and teacher educators and stakeholders as a ICBA for teacher development in Africa in the last month and a half for how to continue learning in this difficult time. This is a very good opportunity for us to think and then what can be done, and then also to share the successful examples and promising approaches from different countries in Africa. We are running this next week in French language. So this one is in English language. I must thank Victoria and other staff for preparing this so beautiful this webinar so beautifully. I also would like to thank Arigato International staff for having walked along with us. This was a journey, a very interesting journey for us to think of peace and resilience building and prevention of violent extremism through teacher development in African countries. And Arigato International has been a great partner for us. Now, lastly, I would like to thank Embassy of Japan and Japanese government for making resources available for us to continue this activity. So I'm personally very much interested in hearing people's presentations. So again, I'd like to welcome all of you to this exciting webinar. Thank you very much. Back to you, Victoria.
Thank you so much, Yumiko, Dr. Yumiko Yokozeki. We appreciate the wonderful remarks and welcome remarks and the appreciation to all our partners. We have on board the next speaker. I hope she's available. That is the director, the region director for the multi-sectoral office in Nairobi for Eastern Africa. That is none other than Antaris Dongjata. Antaris is the director for the region office for UNESCO in Eastern Africa. She's a representative to Kenya, Comoros, Eritrea, Madagascar, Mauritius, and other countries. And she holds a Master of Science in Education Leadership and has a long career in education and leadership. She has held several high-profile government positions, and also she served as the Minister for Gambia for Education between 1999 and 2004. After that, she was a key player that led the negotiations for the fast track program for the Education for All goals, now called GPE. And she was also responsible for overseeing the creation of the first in Gambia, that is the University of the Gambia. And Therese will be talking to us about what the impact of COVID-19 on the education of children and young people in the African context is looking like, and some of the key challenges that the education sector is facing in this context, particularly in addressing the needs of the most vulnerable children. And she's also going to be talking to us about how the education sector can respond to these challenges during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. And Therese, our director, you're welcome to give your remarks.
Okay, thank you very much, Victoria. Thank you, Yumiko and team. Good afternoon to all of you. This is quite an interesting topic, and I must say it has posed a number of questions that I'm sure would keep us thinking, would keep us engaged throughout the session. In fact, I believe this webinar may not be able to do justice to these very interesting questions that seem to have been posed for reflection during this webinar. Let me start by saying in one word, if I were to respond to the main question of what has been the impact. Sorry, I don't know what's happening here. Can you hear me?
Yes, and we hear you very loud and clear.
Yes. What's the impact? One word: disruption. It's been a massive disruption of the education system. As you have clearly outlined in the opening, it caught us unprepared. Unprepared essentially because we have a very weak infrastructure and we do not have what we could call an education system that has a very robust structure to be able to entertain face-to-face or distance program. And so therefore, what we have seen is with the first response being closure of schools, there is a creation of over panic, stress to the system. And we have over 330 million affected learners, not of course counting a situation where we have so many young people that are out of school. So the COVID-19 pandemic has led to school closures all over the world, we know that. And in Africa, it has affected so many, a huge percentage that has also been mentioned. And as a result, there has been different ways of responding across the continent. Studies have shown a wide range of options that countries are looking at, but none of these options, I must admit, are options that have been tried and tested. In most cases, it was like trying to address the situation as they went along. And the options of ensuring continuity of learning, which was more or less the watchword, required, among others, distance education infrastructure, internet connectivity, access to devices, and trained teachers to deliver the online lessons so that children can attend online and or distance classes. However, in Africa, we, as I have already mentioned, given that it's a situation of unpreparedness, all of these that I have just mentioned were not really the first response. Africa does not have the level of internet connectivity to benefit many of its children who are staying at home due to the pandemic. The affected children therefore miss out on this important mode of learning. They couldn't. Then what was the next resort? Even the relatively inexpensive radio and TV are not as widespread as in other parts of the world. This raises the issue of equity and will have major adverse effects on the education of children and youth on the African continent. In situations where the online option will not work, offline solutions have been explored. With some of the offline options, learners would need to be provided with print materials to carry on self-learning, but printing and distributing print materials seem also not to be an easy option, even though it is tried in some countries, from what the studies have shown. But it is also important as we talk about how it's impacted learners, we must also realize that the school provides more than just a platform, an occasion, an opportunity for children to learn. We know that in most of our communities where we are struggling to ensure that children go to school and stay in school, there is also the nutritious meal that the children look out for. So this is also something that is disrupted. So for some children, this is about the only place where they will get a decent meal, one decent meal in the day. Another that we should consider in terms of the disruption is the fact that schools also provide that support, call it psychosocial support for children. So that too is disrupted. And for some, and maybe this is very much linked to the psychosocial support, this is one place where you can call a safe haven for some children, especially children from very abused homes or that kind of situation. There was another question that was posed for which I should really give a few comments, and these were, these include what are the key challenges that education sector faces in this context, particularly addressing the needs of the most vulnerable. I believe, to be honest, and from what we are reading from the assessment done both by ADEA, and then also there's another study carried out by UNICEF and the World Bank, we have created huge disparities. The responses have created huge disparities, because even as we have resorted to radios, TV, we know that there are communities where you do not even access a radio not to talk about a TV. So therefore, what we are really witnessing at this moment is that the response have not gone far enough. The key challenge that the education sector faces in the context of the pandemic, particularly in addressing the needs of the most vulnerable, is the absence of the infrastructure to reach learners in remote locations. With distance and or online lessons, or with television or with radio, this is impossible. This has the potential, therefore, to exacerbate existing inequalities in access to quality education. The other major challenge is the availability of properly developed online lessons fit for radio, TV, or internet-based classes. Again, given the level of unpreparedness, there were lots of crash courses, if you want to call it that, by some of the institutions at the country level to make do with what they have so that they could deploy some of these on the radio, TV, and one of the areas that is evident is that no matter what is done, it is not done with teachers. So there were materials prepared by educators, quite all right, but not necessarily engaging the teachers. So there wasn't much of what you would call interactive learning, and given the level of poverty in most of the households, you may not even have sufficient time where you have one TV or one radio for parents and children all to benefit at the same time. So I can only imagine that even with the availability of these on radio and TV, you still have challenge for children to follow. I give an example of a feedback I had received here in Kenya in particular. Even where these were made available, some parents felt they were not informed, they didn't know. So there is a question of how well were these communicated when they were introduced. And this is not only in the case of Kenya, but in so many other countries. There are countries that are still even struggling, because I believe Kenya is a little bit better to some extent in that it has cloud computing, where some of the content is in cloud. You have cases where they have not even yet started engaging and ensuring that learning continues. There is a third major challenge, and I think this challenge is one that has constantly been harped upon by Yumiko in a number of fora we have met, and is that of the capacity of the teacher. Most teachers in Africa do not have the training and skills to undertake teaching via distance and online platforms. So yes, they are not so much engaged just yet, and therefore it means there is need for that training to take place. And apart from that, if you're talking about internet use, most of the teachers do not even have the ICT skills. You would all recall that when most governments were looking at introducing technology, the first thought was one laptop per child. I had always held the view that it were best if we had started with one laptop per teacher and then move from there. And even where we had the one laptop per child, it had not been used adequately because most teachers didn't even know how to take care of it. And the pandemic has added, as in the case of affected learners, another dimension to the challenge of unqualified or untrained teachers. So here you have a situation where the pandemic is not going to help, because for those who are qualified, they do not have the skill set to cope with it. And yet we know we have a huge number of unqualified teachers or untrained teachers, whichever way you want to call it. Another question that also was posed was how can education respond to these challenges during and after COVID-19? And I believe these are all related questions. And as I mentioned earlier, the education sector had tried to find solutions, but these are solutions that have not gone far enough. And I believe there's been a lot of ongoing engagement to really mobilize and rally around support from partners, be it from the UN side or from bilaterals, multilaterals, telecommunications, to support the infrastructure. But all of these would take time. And I believe as we move forward, we see a lot of opportunity. While we would try to respond using the readily available infrastructure of the radio and TV, there is need to begin to look at other solutions. And these are options that are really being employed, which will respond to ensuring that we build back better. I think there's an echo. Somebody's mic, if it can be turned off, please.
Colleagues, turn off your microphones as we have agreed, plus the video. I know, Antoinette, you are worried about not seeing people. It's okay. You will see us later. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And so therefore, even as we are responding, and this is the challenge, generally when we say respond, it is to respond to trying to fix a situation that looks like where you were before the pandemic. The position I want to put forward is that, yes, we may want to, in the short term, look at where we were, but I believe it's an opportunity, as has been referred to by Yumiko and yourself, Victoria, to begin to focus on how we can use this opportunity to improve and build better education systems, so that should there be the need to close down in the future, it would not create the level of panic, it would not create this level of disruption that has really affected learners, affected parents, affected society as a whole, because the fact that we are not able to engage the young people maximally is also opening another challenge of, would these children be so accustomed to being out of school that they would drop out of the system? Would these children be exposed to other vices, like we already have heard, increase in criminality, increase in gender-based violence? And so what do we need to do differently using this opportunity? And one of the things we are really discussing at the moment is going beyond fixing what used to be and looking at what can be. And what can be would be ensuring that we are now able to invest better in our infrastructure and build better education systems that would not really panic over the fact that we have children that are supposed to prepare for their examinations, and therefore the first response should be to cater to the needs to those children that are preparing for examination. I believe with technology today, we can look at possibilities of e-assessment. We tried that in Rwanda, and they were very well set in looking at that as an option. So there is e-assessment. There is also the possibility of using technology to build better the capacity of teachers, using technology, not in the sense that people tend to really argue over our lack of infrastructure as not being able to. I believe with the present density of mobile phones, there is also the possibility of now looking at mobile phones as a way of really continuing learning. And more importantly, I think there is one which we do not always explore, because each time we talk about technology, we think of connectivity. And yet we do have the option of offline, intranet. And if we can begin to build resource centers, and this is an option we are looking at right now, developing a regional hub on one hand, where a lot of the open educational resources, a lot of the support for learning about how to do something, learning about how to really build better systems, etc., could really feed into the national hubs or resource centers that are using intranet. And intranet is low-tech, and it's something like the technology used in digital libraries. And with digital libraries, you do not necessarily need the internet. It's all already uploaded. So with a modem, it is therefore possible to begin to look at how do we adapt better and differently. And this situation of creating these hubs would also be one that would be relevant and appropriate as we build this technology for the health system. It can also be appropriate in order to support the infrastructure we require for energy, because rather than depend on the grid, we can now look at alternative energy sources like solar or wind or what have you. All of this would help us build our weak infrastructure to ensure that even for the measures that are requested, are recommended, you still need all of those infrastructure. Social distancing, the
Sorry,
issue
and I'm
of
going to
ensuring
interrupt
that
you. I'm going to interrupt you, and
I'm almost concluding.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. And
I'm almost concluding. So really what I'm really just closing up with is the fact that whatever infrastructure we try to build would also serve other sectors. So the opportunity is to really look at an intersectoral approach in responding to COVID-19 in order to support a more resilient education system. Thank you very much.
thank you very, very much. And I know you're so passionate about this, but I take all the points and issues that you have raised. And colleagues, don't forget that out of this webinar, we are also getting insights for a learning module that we are going to develop, which is focused on supporting our educators to support learners during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. So keep your recommendations and suggestions going in the chat room. And we really appreciate the wonderful points from our keynote speaker. Thank you so much, Anne. Now, we're going to have a quick panel discussion, but we have two presenters just before the discussion. We have Maria. Maria Lucia is the director for Algato International in Geneva. And as I'm giving a bio about her, kindly Henok upload her PowerPoint presentation. Maria is the executive director of Algato International in Geneva. She currently heads the strategic implementation and expansion of ethics education for the Children Initiative. And she's quite experienced in a number of areas, including being one of the conveners for the International Consortium on nurturing values and spirituality in early childhood for the prevention of violence. And she's also a member of the working group on education and fragility for the International Agency Network for Education in Emergencies, that is INE. And she holds a master's degree in peace and conflict transformation with a specialization in economics and social and cultural rights, plus a bachelor's degree in international relations and finance. Maria is going to be talking to us about how we as educators can respond to a number of these challenges that children who we have in our custody have been affected with in terms of their vulnerabilities related to poverty, domestic violence and conflicts, and violent extremism. So she's going to throw more light in terms of what we can do as educators, and also how the education systems can adapt to these demands, and how we educators can provide spaces for learners to reflect about this changing world. Over to you, Maria. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Victoria. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you very much to you, Miko, as well, and for the collaboration that Algato and ICBA has been having during the last 3 years, trying to strengthen the role of education and teachers in peace and resilience building. So it's a pleasure for me to be part of this discussion. I think it's very relevant to look at the role of education, but also more in particular, the role of teachers in supporting the well-being of children in these difficult times. So as Anne-Therese has mentioned, the impact of COVID on children and the challenges that education faced due to the pandemic, I want to build on what she mentioned, to highlight another type of vulnerability, which is the invisibility of children in this pandemic and on those who are more vulnerable. Next slide, please, Henok. So children in the COVID-19 narrative have been on the sidelines. The narrative, the impact of the school and of the several measures taken by the governments of the virus. There is noise. Can you hear me? Hello?
I think there was something bumpy in your sound. Maybe try again. Thank you.
So I was mentioning that the narrative on the impact of children of school closures and of the several measures taken by the governments to slow down the spread of the virus has focused on children's access and learning, how children are missing classes, how exams have to be postponed, the low quality of learning or the lack of access to remote learning. Epidemiologists, experts, politicians have also said that children are asymptomatic or that they are not likely to get the virus. It is true that statistically, the number of children infected or dead because of the virus have been low. However, children are highly affected by the pandemic itself, the measures taken and the stressors in the families and societies. In this narrative about COVID-19, not much has been said about how this pandemic can negatively affect children's lives in the longer term, their mental health, their perception of the world around them and globally, their understanding of their relations with others, and how the current situation affects children's socio-emotional and spiritual well-being, particularly for those already affected by poverty, violence, and the risk of recruitment into violent extreme groups. This lack of narrative in the society at large and in the responses of governments have led, I believe, in decreasing budget allocations for important child protection services and for the prevention of violence, for deprioritizing participatory spaces for children and youth, and invisibilizing children as key actors in the society, and particularly in providing solutions for them, for now and for the future. So what kind of responses is needed from teachers in contexts affected by these multiple challenges? So I would like to propose 5 actions. Next, Henok. The first one is the socio-emotional mental health of educators. So educators need to take care of themselves and should be given support to strengthen their socio-emotional and mental health. Teachers cannot be key responders when their mental and socio-emotional health is affected. Teachers have to deal with the stress of being at home, taking care of their children, homeschooling them, taking care of the chores, and in addition, learning new technologies they are not used to. This, coupled with financial challenges, affect their capacity to deliver their work. So 2 important things can be done. Firstly, create teachers' peer support online groups. Encourage teachers to talk to one another via WhatsApp groups or other tools for them to share about their feelings, experiences, challenges, and success stories during this time. Research has proved that peer support for teacher development is key for their success, and it helps building their confidence. In these difficult times, we cannot afford to be in isolation. Peer engagement can help teachers feel supported, not alone, and provide inspiration and concrete ideas to respond to the needs of the learners. The second is another way is by encouraging teachers to use meditation techniques such as mindfulness. This will not change the reality outside or the many challenges teachers face, but will increase their resilience and capacity to deal with the many stressors they face. Mindfulness can help teachers to reflect about their emotions, create better communication with their students, and it can help juggling the competing demands. Mindfulness practice has also been shown in research to alter the brain structure of practitioners in positive ways, improve concentration, emotional self-regulation, and decrease burnout symptoms, among many other benefits that we are seeing nowadays with the crisis for teachers, for parents, and for children themselves. So this is the first one. The second one, Henok, is the educators more than ever need to transform and adapt learning into more contextual experiences for children and youth to respond to their socio-emotional needs. This means that teachers are called to make sure that education during this time goes beyond memorizing facts or repeating information. In fact, learning hardcore subjects has to become a secondary priority for schools and for teachers at this moment. What is needed is to create opportunities for children and youth to express their feelings, to feel heard, to be accompanied and help them deal with the stress they go through, as well as help them reflect about the situation, providing them with support to develop other life skills like empathic listening, critical thinking, and self-driven learning. Social-emotional learning is critical now. Teachers can become safety nets for children who experience abuse and violence. They can be sources of hope in a time when children do not see escape from this new reality and when they feel disconnected from what is important for them, their other peers, their friends, their teachers, neighbors, extended family, or social workers. With no one to talk to or turn to in addition to the stress they experience at home, this can have long-term repercussions in their well-being. Educators can share positive messages with children, share stories of hope and determination that they help children reflect. They can ask children to write in a learning log their feelings and create spaces for sharing with one another. So what we need is a reciprocal learning, less vertical. So, teachers thinking that they have to put information into the minds of children, but it's a more reciprocal approach. It's a horizontal approach. So asking children questions, creating opportunities for them to do things at home and then, reflect and share back about this. So the role is to keep children engaged. The third one, Henok, if you can move to the next one. So, of course, in this process, teachers also need to increase communication with parents and caregivers, as well as religious communities and civil society organizations. Education in crisis cannot function in isolation, nor teachers should be demanded to be the main responsible for learning. With the lockdown, parents and caregivers become the first responders, but we know that this is not the case in many households, and Therese spoke about this, where parents are preoccupied with their work and other demands. Teachers should communicate to parents about what is expected from them, provide them with simple and yet concrete tools to support children. For instance, just listening to children, empathize with their frustration, offer spaces for sharing in the family. Teachers can also help parents realize their responsibilities and bring them on board as a team, so they feel they are critical in providing education and support during this time. Religious communities also play an important role in providing support to children's education during this time, either through counseling and support to parents, caregivers, and educators, or through their sermon or radio program that they help children understand the situation, reflect about their experiences, and share messages of hope, or creating spaces for radio education programs. Teachers can provide information to religious communities or civil society organizations about families in need or about suspected domestic violence, so they can provide the support needed. The fourth one is make learning fun. And
you have 3 minutes. Sorry, Maria, you have 3 minutes. Just to sum it up in 3 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's less about the technological skills of the educators, and I think Anne-Therese was talking about that, but more about the creativity to engage children. And so for this, teachers can record stories using their mobile phones, and those can be shared via WhatsApp for parents to share with children. They can share simple activities parents can do with children. For example, while cooking, for instance, small children can practice calculations when helping to cook, or older children can learn about nature when doing gardening. Children can be asked to listen to the news and share with the teacher what they heard, what was relevant, does it affect a group of the population, so they can practice thinking, critical thinking. If you go next, Victoria, there was a second question. It's about the importance of interconnectedness today and how education can respond to this. So today, more than ever, we realize the importance of this interconnectedness as we face the rupture of the world that has privileged individualism and economic growth. And we are seeing the need to prioritize social safety nets. So this is the changing world we are seeing today for children with higher levels of stress, anxiety, uncertainty. And we are now raising children in constrained environments filled with fear and with less connection, physical connection with others. So COVID-19 has also exacerbated xenophobia, hate, and exclusion, as mentioned by the UN Special Rapporteur on minority issues. We are seeing reports on political leaders calling for denying access to medical service to migrants, stigmatization of COVID-19 infected people based on their ethnic or religious background, In some countries, we are seeing a rise in Islamophobia, and across social media, we're also seeing a rise in hate speech against minority groups. Unfortunately, we are seeing in places with ongoing conflicts how religious and ethnic divide have been reinforced with the pandemic, and recent studies have also shown concerns in Africa that the impacts of the pandemic and government responses may exacerbate some of the underlying drivers for radicalization to violent extremism. And so we see that the children, of course, have more access now to the internet, that they don't have spaces to check if the information they are getting is true or not. So the continued display of discriminatory rhetoric affects children and young people's views of the world, their relation with others, and create negative narratives about the other that might become normalized in societies as nationalistic groups gain more space and exacerbate their ideologies against minorities. So in view of this reality, my last recommendation is to emphasize the spaces for the spiritual development and growth of children. This doesn't mean teaching religion, but creating opportunities for children to connect with themselves, with one another, with the divine or the transcendent force, reflect about their purpose, make sense of this new reality, become aware of the sacredness of life in connection with others, and participate in society. And so what can teachers do for this is empower children, create opportunities to empower children. Children's spirituality and ethical reflections can be enhanced through their empowerment. A very important way to protect and support children is actually by empowering them. Very often we think that the protection of children is a vertical action that we do towards children, but we forget that children are individuals in their own right, and that their empowerment is critical for their protection from violence and extreme ideologies, and to ensure their participation in society. An empowered child is a child that can think critically, a child that can speak up about their views, a child that is aware of the social reality, understand the consequences of their views, a child that practices empathy and solidarity with others, is aware of this interconnectedness, and is equipped to respond. It's a child whose spirituality is nurtured and affirmed. So teachers can help reflect about this. They can help, creating opportunities for children to take control of their own learning, for them to develop, collective actions with others. And I think that's important how I started on this invisibility of children and the reduction of spaces for children to participate. And I believe that's a very critical role of teachers, creating opportunities for children to speak up, to raise their voices, and to reflect about these new realities. So I
Thank you very much.
I have just want to conclude with a few points. So we need to make education part of the solution. And I think we are seeing a lot that there is a lot of talk on children's, needs to learn. But what about children need to speak and reflect about this changing world? Education is to be embedded in this contextual reality. So we are facing a pandemic that is unprecedented. We need to speak about this in our school settings, and teachers should be speaking about this with children. We need to prioritize ethical and spiritual education, as I've been speaking about. Teachers can help fostering social cohesion in a time when the social fabric of our societies are at risk. And I think that's very important that teachers provide opportunities for children to learn about this interconnectedness, on the importance of respecting one another, on this new world that we are creating, and empower children to shape it. So these are, I think, some contributions, and I look forward to listening to Peter and his concrete experience as a teacher. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maria. This is awesome. It's such an insightful presentation. We really appreciate. I see so many comments for you in the chat room. I'll not go into the details in the interest of time, because I want to create enough space for us to discuss and dialogue, and also come up with recommendations. So colleagues, keep the comments going and the questions. Someone is taking care of them. Now, allow me to invite Brother Peter Tibichi. He's a teacher. As I give the profile, Enoch, you upload the PowerPoint. So he's a Kenyan science teacher from Kericho Mixed Day Secondary School in Nakuru County in Kenya. He's an award winner, by the way, of the Global Teachers Prize. And he launched the Talent Nurturing Club, which has dramatically improved the attendance of learners in the school. He established the Peace Club, and which has been able to unite a number of representatives that were involved previously in violence. He engages in local community dialogues, teaching residents how to grow crops that can resist famine. And the students are focused on projects that are on renewing or projects on renewable energy, and they develop devices which can support people with disabilities. In a nutshell, a lot of great work as the champion for children in conflicts and crisis, which is funded by Education Cannot Wait. So he's going to be talking about, as a teacher, what his experience has been related to COVID-19 and how it has affected him as a teacher and how he has been able to adjust within this very context, and then what kind of recommendations he's going to be giving us as educators in terms of learning and fostering socio-emotional well-being of learners within the COVID pandemic. Over to you, Peter. You have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's really great to come together to share our experiences. And therefore, I want to really thank God for this opportunity to be alive. You know, to share. It's through sharing that we'll be able to learn, because each day is a day of learning. To the first part is my experience that's related to COVID-19 as a teacher. So as the other colleagues of mine have said, recently when World Health Organization declared a global COVID-19 pandemic, you know, we saw, you know, closing of schools, and that has really negatively impacted, you know, many students, and I've seen it even with my students, and many are out, and especially the most deprived and the vulnerable students are the most affected, because they are just at home and they cannot be able to access, you know, online learning, you know, services the same way the other children in maybe the other areas, the developed countries, can, they are able to access. And then there's also a challenge of child care. You know, parents are having had, you know, difficult times at home. They have to, you know, be like caretakers at the same time like teachers. And then sometimes, you know, at the same time you see they have to eat. And therefore, especially for those families which are very poor, who cannot be able to provide meals, it becomes a very big challenge. And then many children also feel their parents, you know, as just, you know, just as parents, as caretakers. And when they are trying to say, like assisting them or trying to teach them, it's so difficult for them to, you know, understand them. They cannot really feel them as teachers, and therefore it becomes very hard for them to really facilitate the, you know, to help them, you know, teach them at home. The next slide. The next slide.
You can keep talking as we show
yes,
the slides.
now
Don't worry.
So this COVID, you see, has really forced parents to be like teachers, you know, a role which they have never played before. And therefore, you see, at times they don't have the pedagogy skills, you know, to teach. And at the same time, you have also seen, you know, even students learning, and even, you know, many teachers trying to adapt to the online, you know, learning tools, which is so hard for them. And then parents have also raised a number of issues. You know, they are facing quite a number of challenges as they try to assist their children, you know, try to learn at home. Like one of the challenge is intermittent power supply, and then there's an issue with the connectivity, as the others have said, and then there are also no learning resources, like it, you know, the way we have them at school. So it's a big challenge, you know, for them to really learn in that at times you find that even at home it's really not conducive, you know, it's really not a very conducive environment for learning. At times, you know, there are so many other activities going on, and therefore in a way they disrupt learning, any kind of learning that takes place at home. And then there is also an issue of what I've experienced is, you know, how do you get students to be safe online, even offline? and therefore there is this needs to be addressed. And then the other thing is, you see children lack proper time management, and like a school whereby, at this time is break time. This is the time they're going to have lunch, everything there's a timetable. But now at home, at times parents go to work and then, children are at home and therefore they really lack proper time management and therefore it becomes very hard for them. And then the other one is that there are academic gaps driven by inequality. And also digital divide, as I've said that we have, different, kind of classes of families and communities. Some have access to the internet and the devices, others don't have, and therefore this is really a big challenge. And then I've also tried to bring my students together, but it has been very hard. Bring them together is hard because of some don't have, they don't have access to the internet, and students don't, in many cases, are not allowed to have phones, so they use mobile phones of their parents and their guardians and their, brothers and sisters, and then, that becomes a challenge trying to bring them together, to really conduct the online, kind of to facilitate the online learning. And then even if they have all of these, they have, the phones, there's the internet, there is still low level of computer literacy. And this will take time before they really learn these things. And then there's also, in a way, lack of self-motivation. And then I can say that these are some of the things which really make these children, the hour of this COVID-19, it's really going to be, I can say in a way, traumatic, because the current children are going to live to remember this year, associate this year with the effects of COVID-19. And then the second question was about how has COVID, the experience of COVID-19 has affected me as a teacher. In the first place, I can say that I feel physically separated from my students. At times I feel like I miss them. I feel, hey, when will this, be over so that I go back to teach? I feel separated from my students, from, educators and fellow teachers. And yes, the other thing, yeah, the other thing is that there's no schedule here at home. There's no schedule, so most of the time I have to, come up with my personal schedule. I have to know how, unlike a school where there is, everything is, there's a timetable and there, you listen to the orders, everything. But now, even myself, when I'm at home, I have to come up with and manage my own schedule. So it has really affected me to adjust to this new way of life. And then the other thing is that I feel like my role as a teacher has been changed. Why am I saying that my role as a teacher has been changed? It's because I now focus really on facilitating learning, for my students. And like the other, the few weeks ago, I will wake up in the morning, go to class to teach. But here comes, I'm now, I have to be guiding the students, instead of just acting as a source of knowledge. And then the other thing that I do is linking my students to other students from other schools and maybe even other countries, and also assisting them to have, have access to the resource materials, because at times they call me and then they tell me that we don't have this, how can we get this? So mine is just to guide them how they can have access to these, materials. And then it has made me, unlike before, I used to be in the four-wall classroom or teaching, but right now I can still reach them, even whichever place where they are. I even don't know where they are, but I'm still able to reach out to them. And then the other thing is that they are becoming really, I'm really encouraging them to be like global citizens, because in this way of trying to connect them, trying to, link them to other students, they are able to also gain those, they become like global citizens. And then the other part is how have I been able to adjust to this context? So as a teacher, I say that I don't just, now that there is COVID-19 and we are not teaching at school the way we have been doing from the other years, I don't say that let me just sleep and then do nothing and now that wait when this is going to be over. No, I have to take action. All of us are supposed to take action, and there are a few things I've done. The first thing I've done is I've tried to reach out to my students through WhatsApp. But most of my students come from humble backgrounds and they don't have access to the internet. But at times, once in a while, they're able to get mobile phones from their parents. So I'm able to reach them through WhatsApp. And then the other thing I've done is teaching them to be resilient, to have hope and to be aware of what a virus is and not to have fear, that even if someone gets this virus, it's not the end of life. And then the other thing I've done is also to participate in online forums, and so that I keep myself engaged, I keep myself busy as I also try to guide and, help other people. Then,
Peter, you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. So I've seen this one as an opportunity to really transform the world. Here we have an opportunity with us, and we can really transform the world. And the other thing I've done is to engage my students in STEM club activities online. We used to do them just physically, but right now I'm able to really bring them together, and they are able to, through like WhatsApp, they are able to do some STEM club activities. And finally, I just mentioned a few recommendations here and there. What can be done? We need to come up with solutions to keep children learning where there is no internet. Number two, there is a need to train to safeguard children when they're online. Number three, there is a need to give them food at home. They don't have meals the way they used to have in school. Even like for girls, they don't have access to the suntan towels. And then after the pandemic, I also suggest that there's a need to have reliable internet access for all, like now starting from school. And then there should be no, educational cuts. So we should defend our budgets, educational budgets, so that to ensure that education is not going to be affected. And then the other one is that we should have a safe environment for teachers and also for students. And then training to teach online. Many teachers at the moment are struggling to teach and trying to learn some of the, online ways. And then fast track edtech strategies. And we need to, be aware that technology will not replace teachers, but teachers who do not use technology can easily be replaced. And then finally, what I can just generalize and say is that this is an opportunity for us to reshape education, whereby we focus on competence based learning. And then even at home, parents, those who have not gone to school, they can still teach their children on how to do basic things like weeding flowers, planting crops. And then finally is let us now use this moment to really for people to appreciate the need to have resilience, flexibility, creativity, social-emotional skills, continuous learning. That learning doesn't stop when you finish school. That you still keep learning even when you are out of school. And I think this is a great moment for us to come together and really plan to make the world a better place to live in. Thanks so much, and may God bless you.
Wow, thank you so much, Peter, for the insightful presentation. I can tell from the comments from the chat room that people wanted to hear more, but the time is not enough. We will be sharing the presentations. Just in case you need the presentations, kindly paste your email address in the meeting chat room, and we will pick it up and share the PowerPoint presentations with you. I want to hand over to my colleague, Jerusalem. We are going into the session for discussion, but we are going to begin with some of the questions and to the speakers, the 4 speakers that presented. We are going to utilize the first 10 minutes probably responding to those questions and comments. And I have my colleague, Jerusalem, who has been very instrumental in organizing this webinar. she's going to lead us through with some of the issues that have been rising within the chat room. Thank you for your wonderful comments. I hand over to Jerusalem.
Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you for participating in this webinar. Oh, it's quite a lot of questions and comments coming, but with some similarities, of course. So for the interest of time, I will pick some of the questions, 4 or 5 questions to be answered by presenters. These are general questions which are not directed to one presenter. So maybe I will read the questions and I will leave for the speaker to respond to some of the questions. And the first question is, as we plan to have teacher fostering cohesion and empowering learners, how do we ensure cohesion among teachers themselves? How do we empower teachers and look at their well-being as well? Is there any good practice? And the second question also relates to the lack of infrastructure, and in the absence of electricity and connectivity, how can teachers develop resilience? And how can also teachers use the curriculum, which is more of assessment focused? And there is also one question on the online and distance learning are good methods, but there is still a challenge of developing talents which is done at school. Practical training is also a challenge. So any position or suggestion on this issue? And there is also a question on children's being addicted to screens and phones. So addiction to screens is a serious issue, and we should not inadvertently create another problem while finding a solution for one. So how can we balance between these two, addiction versus education for children using ICT? And the fifth question is, we focus on the challenge. Is there any opportunities and learning points that we get out of this? So this is a general questions for any of the speakers.
Thank you,
Victoria, how do
Jerusalem.
we proceed? Shall we
Yes,
give
we
them
we can pause it right there and ask any of our speakers to attempt to respond to these general questions on curriculum issues, assessment, addiction on the screens, and the other issues that you've raised. So probably in the next 5 minutes, I just quickly hand over the microphone to any of our 4 speakers. That is Yumiko, Andres, Maria, and Peter. And feel free to just give your views and perspectives. Thank you.
This is Maria Lucia Jerusalem. Well, maybe responding to the question on technology and what can be done when teachers don't have access to technology, or teachers don't have access, and then children don't have access to the internet. And I talk about WhatsApp, and I think now when Peter talked about what he used, and he talked also about WhatsApp, I think in most of the places where we have been discussing with teachers, this is the main medium that teachers are using to communicate to children in conflict areas, in fragile contexts, where there is no internet. And I think we underestimate the power of this. I'm thinking of simple things that a teacher can do, as I mentioned, like, recording a story with their mobile phone and sharing, 3 minutes of a story with their learners, or sending a message to their parents, or things that can be done, sharing small, short messages of hope, as also Peter was saying. So I think there is a lot that can be done with WhatsApp, and also reminding that during the Ebola crisis, actually, what we realized and the learning was that online learning didn't have a significant impact on children, but it had a more significant impact on the teachers. So meaning that what was used actually for children was more radio programs, and about 1 million children benefit from education using radio. But for teachers, there is much more potential to use online learning and opportunities. And Therese spoke about this, that the training of teachers is important. And I think this is a critical opportunity to provide more spaces online for teachers to learn about these practical ways to reach to children in different ways.
Thank you very much. Can I?
Yes, Anne, please go ahead.
Let me just build on that. I agree that mobile phones would really help in a situation like this. But then there is a danger, and this is the reason why I'm looking at intranet and the offline possibility. And this is more in the area of also building back better. Because with the offline, you really protect the children from cybercrime. You protect them from browsing other sites that probably are not appropriate. And what the offline does is just that probably we haven't got much exposure to it. It's really creating a situation where it's a space. You use digital solutions. You have books. You have videos, you would have all the lessons, you'll have the textbooks that the teachers are supposed to use and workbooks that students are supposed to follow. And there could be that conversation and remote learning and interaction. So for me, I think this is the one game changer I would put forward to governments to see how we can use technology, but low tech, in making sure that a lot of things can happen, including the reference made by Maria of really addressing some of the socio-emotional context of students. You can do storytelling, you can get them to do competition, art competition. I also agree with Maria that we have a system that is too examination oriented, and the stress and panic that teachers and students are going through, if you ask me, is more about exams rather than the well-being, rather than the welfare of teachers. But if we had made it lighter through these possibilities, using mobile phone, we spoke to Facebook and Google, and in fact with Facebook you can do a lot of things. Even a classroom can be created. But given the fact that this is not always possible, that's why I thought of the intranet, creating resource centers where we can project and boost the modem for everybody to be able to access wherever they may be without necessarily using internet. I saw a question that was talking about the electricity. This is the reason why I say this is an opportunity to build our systems better. Make sure that we look at alternative energy solutions rather than just the grid that doesn't go all the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne, for those wonderful insights. We have, do you have any comments from observations from Peter as the teacher or from Yumiko?
This Peter, I can say that someone was asking a question, how do you like get children, all the time they are on the screen, they are on their phone, how do you handle this? I can say that children need guidance. They need to be guided. If you leave them alone, it's really going to be chaotic, and therefore they need to be, you need to guide them. Like the other thing I can suggest is that you never leave phones, leave phones with them. They'll end up misusing them, and they always want to use them. So I think it's good to have some kind of a schedule, not to really have children all the time they are on, other than just using phones or on the screen all the time. You come up, as parents, or as other people, we can come up with a schedule whereby we create programs of other things which they can do at home. Like now they can do some, some games like rope skipping, there is, even bicycle riding, and then they can also learn on how to plant, like the crops, grow vegetables, the gardening, the gardening, and so on and so forth. So if there is a schedule and they're properly guided, I'm very sure they'll not really, be screwed all the time. They are on this, the screens or using the phones all the time. That's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you.
Hi,
Yes.
hi, Victoria.
Yes, Yumiko.
Maybe.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead with the presenter first.
No, please, Yumiko, go ahead.
Okay, that's Jerusalem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Briefly, I would like to come back to what Maria And Antalet said that we have to look at the low technology in the continent, but low technology is definitely not low quality education. And a lot of teachers are using WhatsApp very effectively and innovatively. After this COVID-19 school closure, I do believe that education will change, and then we have to rebuild better. For that, I think we are now in a critical time to look at the real importance of education. Education is not just for the examination. It should be more than that, and it should be resilience. It should be compassion, and then it should be living together, learning to live together. So this is a very good opportunity for us to see what we can do. And I'm particularly happy to hear from a teacher from Kenya. So over to you, Jerusalem.
Yes, thank you very much, Himiko. And we have 4 questions, and it's directed to Maria and Peter. And 3 of the questions, the first questions will go to Maria, and the fourth one is for both of them. And Maria, there are 3 questions, and the first one is, how can teachers show compassion to learners during the school closure and distance learning? And the second question says, parents are struggling with a pedagogical approach they have never been taught to use. Some have challenges because they are less educated than their children. They are at loss of how to help their children. How can we support parents in this new education landscape? And the third question is, how social skills be developed among learners with the social distancing at the same time? I think this third question really will take you to your personal experience also. A very interesting one. And the fourth one is, it's also for Peter. How can teacher can be empowered enough to be facilitators and not teachers? Or in other words, is there any experience of teacher-centered method of teaching? These are all the questions. Maria?
Yes, thank you, Rosalind. On the question of compassion, I believe that the best way to show compassion to the children, to the students, is by listening to them. And I think at times we focus too much on, children have to do homework, children need to, respond to what the teachers ask them to do. And I think there is an important shift in the way we address children, is what I call this more reciprocal approach to with the learners, is, what they think, how they feel, asking the questions to them. And I think that changes also the approach of the child. They see the teacher not someone they have to report to, but someone they can engage in learning, they can engage in dialogue. So for me, the best way to show compassion is actually by listening to children, and also showing our own vulnerabilities as teachers, that we are also in this together, that we are also affected by the crisis. So how we can support each other. So I think we have to work side by side with the students, instead of having this vertical approach that we are used to. So that for that question, in terms of parents struggling with the pedagogical approach, I think that's very, very needed. In Arigato International, we developed actually a booklet with 32 activities for families that they can do at home with their children, which are very similar to what I have been speaking about on, how to create the spaces within the family for children to think about their interconnectedness with others, to develop empathy between family members. And I think there is a need to, approach parents on, what are the simple things they can do at home, how they can create more quality time at home, how they can listen to children, how they can foster gratitude for the simple things in life now that they are all together at home, locked down. So how the parents and caregivers can create some spaces for dialogue. So I think we shouldn't expect parents to become teachers. They cannot be teachers. You study to become a teacher. So we cannot expect parents to become teachers, but they can be supporters in this process to engage children. And it's by creating the proper environment for children to concentrate, for children to reflect, for children to feel at ease and to express their frustrations and feelings. And the third one, on the social skills. And Jerusalem, you're asking me to refer to my personal experience as someone who was working and also at the same time with a small child at home. And I think the experience for me is that that when we create spaces for to create activities for the children, and referring to what Peter said on having a schedule also at home with children. So that's what I did with my child. And I was a combination of, doing things at home that were requested by the school in terms of mathematics and reading and things, which I did in very funny ways. But also, using activities like puppets with children, role play with children at home, listening to stories, to develop skills that are not used in our education system, like empathic listening, creativity, coming up with their own solutions to problems, thinking critically about the situation, what happened outside, why do we have to be locked down. So I think this lockdown and the pandemic itself has presented this opportunity to develop other skills in children that are not present often in schools. As Antares said, it's very much focused on these examinations. So I think this is a great opportunity to focus on this more social-emotional learning in skills that help children to think about the realities outside and connect education with the contextual needs. Thank you. Jerusalem.
Thank you so much. Peter, do you have any observation or you're done?
Okay, there was a question about how do you make teachers as facilitators and not as just as teachers. So I can say that most of the time, teachers are just viewed as people like have the knowledge, who know everything. And to me, I think this is wrong. It's good even before the COVID-19. I was still saying that teachers should always be facilitators, not just teachers. Their role is wide. There's more they can do. It's not just about going to class to lecture. And some of the things that can be done to achieve this is to provide running resources that can make their work easier. Can facilitate their work, like the internet. The other one is materials. At times, teachers want to you want to do a practical, you want to demonstrate something, it's not there. But if these materials are available, then it means your work is going to be more like a facilitator, not just like lecturing, just teaching. And then the other thing that can be done is empowering teachers through training them. There's professional development. So this can be done either through workshops or online. The other thing that can be done is, I can say that this pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic presents, to us an opportunity to change the role of a teacher, not as a teacher, but as a facilitator. And I've said that even myself, at the moment, I feel like my role has changed. You don't see me, going to class, to do what I'm still reaching out to my students, but in a way, I'm facilitating learning. I'm guiding them on how to have access, to learning materials. And therefore, I feel like I'm no longer, my role has changed. Thank you. That's what I can say.
Okay, thank you so much, Peter. I see a lot of comments still flowing in the chat room.
Yeah,
I'm sure Jerusalem, you have a few issues,
yes.
yeah?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I have, but time is limiting us, and I will reflect on some of the comments as it's related to recommendations and suggestions on how to empower teachers and parents. And colleagues, this is the first webinar, and we're going to have consecutive webinars in relation to how to support parents and also how to use transformative pedagogy in this kind of crisis. So this is a webinar which we're going to have for the next 3 weeks, the same time every Wednesday. So you can join us on that. And the next week will be actually in French. And also the goal of this webinar is, once we have all these inputs and discussions, we're going to have a kind of booklet or a summary that can be used by teachers and also by parents on how to support their children. So this is the end goal of the webinar. And we're also going to have a space for these resources, and you'll find this space afterwards on the our website. And also, maybe for your information, we have a school safety manual, which focused more on how to protect children from violence, and what we discussed on so many violence types that in this webinar. You'll find so many information there, and there is also transformative pedagogy guide on how to help children in more engaging ways. So these are the resources that you can find on our webinar. Maybe Victoria, before I hand over to you, there is a text which comes specifically to you requesting 1 minute, and it's from Dr. Gulshan Sharma from India. I will read it. It says, "We wish to support your effort in Africa from India. We'd be kind to give 1 minute time in between to share some 3 important concerns in education empowerment. We wish you to support from our ICSI International Chamber. Regards, Dr. Gulshan." So if we have time, this is up to you, Dr. Victoria, and I hand over the chat moderating. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jerusalem, and we appreciate your comments, colleagues. I know there were other comments, especially around reaching the most vulnerable and learners with disability. We don't want to open up the Pandora box right now, but we take note of those comments. And then, of course, the issue of measurement has stood out a lot. How do you measure effectiveness in the use of distance learning, especially when you're using low technology and the preparedness of parents? Jerusalem has talked about that. And then social skills, and raised a very interesting issue on disruption, and how do we ensure that we plan better next time, and also utilize the multi-sectoral approaches to make sure that we are more prepared than being chronically in a reactive mode, but we switch into a proactive mode. So issues of curricula and the role of teachers, there are lots of comments. We really appreciate them. We have 4 minutes. I don't know if Dr. Gulshan can use the 1 minute he has requested for to share experiences from the other continent. Would really appreciate.
Thank you, Victoria. This is Dr. Gulshan Sharma calling from India. It's indeed a great pleasure to hear, and I'm thankful to Mr. Omar, who is the head of the Education UNESCO in India, who gave me the link this afternoon, and within a short time I could link up over here. 3 important points I wish to discuss over here. During this particular COVID lockdown, when we are talking about, there are certain things which are weaknesses in our education system which have been exposed in a very big way. Particularly the survey which we carried out from our chamber, we found the pedagogy, and particularly first the teachers have to be empowered before we start thinking of empowering youth. Some of the teachers need lot of teaching methodologies and mechanism. That is something very important. Number 2, the gamification in education is going to take a frontal seat, because our chamber, which is spread across 167 countries, 30 million non-resident Indians, those are abroad in different parts. We are discussing with the manufacturers of the games, because some of the games are so productive, innovative, and creative. If they are utilized in our education system in a positive way, and if the creators and the producer of the games, they work out a strategy that they develop only positive games, they can come in a very big way in the education system. Third part, music therapy and theater, that has done wonders as a part of the education system. Last 30 seconds I'll just take. There's a Dr. Sugata Mitra at the Newcastle University, and he has done one experiment. I would request our participants to see on the YouTube. His 3 videos are remarkable. The future of learning, can kids teach themselves, and child-driven education. He has fixed a computer in the wall without any teacher. And finally, he found after 30 days, students were in a position to learn and everything to get at their own without teachers. Somebody made a mention, very interesting, that we have to rebuild for better education. It is not only for the exams, but it is something more than that. Ladies and gentlemen, food is the first part. Health is the second part. And third part, education, new pedagogy will come. Nobody would like to learn unless they earn. Earn and learn is going to be. From the learn, if you remove a word L, it comes only earn. So earn and learn, that means the education, which is going to bring some bread and some kind of a business to somebody, some kind of empowerment for employment and entrepreneurship, then only they would like to go ahead. At the last, I would like to make a mention that our chamber has set up a finishing school in India. Mr. Omar had been very kind from the UNESCO to be a part of the whole process of development, the new pedagogies over here. We would be there to help the entire African continent from your chamber, from your efforts. Once in a week, 45-minute session we can deliver on from the finishing school, which can give the insight what are the new pedagogies and andragogies which are going to come into education in e-teaching, e-learning, and e-empowerment digital way. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. We request that you post the links to the videos you've mentioned in the chat room. Colleagues are already asking for them, and probably your email address for further questions.
I will just send both the video links. And ladies and gentlemen, there is a Sir Ken Robinson also you must watch. There is a video called Do School Skill Creativity. Do School Skill Creativity. It's a worth watching. We must see it on the YouTube. Because unless we do not know what is happening at different places, I'll just put it into the chat box and meeting chat. And God bless all of us. It's a wonderful effort. We would like to be a part of yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, we have run out of time. In this last 1 minute, I just want to thank every presenter, but I also want to hand over to thank for all of you for your participation. I want to hand over to Dr. Emiko for the last word and saying thank you to everyone. Over to you, Dr. Emiko.
Oh dear, thank you very much, Victoria, and thank you very much for all the participants. I don't think it is possible to summarize such a rich interaction, but this is just the beginning of our journey for us to share good examples and already excellent materials from Maria and Arigato, and also Peter. Thank you very much. You are real Mualim. And Antares, as usual, thank you for excellent input. And then finally, from Dr. Sharma, I think we are starting Asia-Africa cooperation. I hope that we can also share something from Africa to Asia. So thank you very much. Please join us in our subsequent webinars. Thank you very much. Back to you, Victoria.
Thank you so much, Yumiko. Thank you, everyone. And we'll take note of your email addresses. We're going to send you the presentations plus the recording for the webinar. See you next Wednesday, the same time. May you have a wonderful evening, a wonderful night, morning, maybe. Yeah, you all, thank you so much. And thank you to all our presenters, Peter, Maria, we really appreciate you and for all the contributors.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Yumiko, Jerusalem. Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. God bless Africa. Thank you.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Asante sana.
Oh,
Thank you.
Asante.
Thank you.
Please say the other thank yous in the other languages. You can post it in the chat room.
Victoria, I'm just wondering if we might be able to put all that information on our homepage. That's what we did.
Yes, we will do so. Yes.
Oh yeah, that's Ugandan. Jerry, what? Wow. Never thank